Thank you for tuning in to the next episode of Time Traveler's Handbook. We are in the middle of our analysis for Bill and Ted Face the Music. Spoilers for Bill and Ted ahead. There is a point in Bill and Ted where it's revealed that the wives of Bill and Ted are also time traveling alongside Bill and Ted as they try to find the answer to their crisis. This brings up an interesting situation where you have multiple time travelers going through time at the same time. There are different scenarios where this can happen, and the one that happens in this movie is basically the principle that as one party moves through time, the other party is moving alongside them. This is possible because of the principle of multiple time periods being in sync, which we'll discuss in more detail with the next episode. The other situation that can happen where multiple people are traveling, and I'll just touch on this briefly, is when multiple time periods are not in sync, in which case, time traveling at the same time means something very different. Someone could spend an eternity traveling away from the other time traveler and then come back in contact with them on their next destination, and it wouldn't make a difference to the other time traveler. They would think they just saw them moments before. That's why what's going on in Bill and Ted is much more interesting. By virtue of time being consistent throughout the universe, the dynamic of other people traveling alongside you means that the time that you spend in certain places matters. It makes it possible to have stakes between time travelers when before you could time travel somewhere and have as much time as you want. There are two different cases of simultaneous time travel in the movie. The first one, as I mentioned before, it's the case of Bill and Ted's wives time traveling with Bill and Ted's wives from the future. Their goal is to try to convince the past versions of their wives that there is no universe in which they end up happy with Bill and Ted. So, while Bill and Ted are looking for a universe where they know what song they played at their pivotal performance, their wives are going to the same places and seeing how horrible they are. They follow alongside, and because they left a little bit later, they arrive in the new locations a little bit later than them each time. Ultimately, and rather romantically, they decide that there is no other timeline or world in which they would be happier than their current one. The second case is with the time-traveling robot assassin, Dennis Caleb McCoy, who is sent from the future to eliminate Bill and Ted before they destroy the fabric of time. Dennis is capable of time travel on his own and doesn't need to use other time machines we see in the show. Because the future isn't set, the robot isn't able to tell where they are going and thus can't be a step ahead of them, but rather has to follow in their footsteps as they travel through time. This reads a lot like a chase sequence, where they can evade the robot for some time, but can't evade him forever and end up being killed by him as well. I feel like the mechanic is used well in the film, and it works well in the context of the story, which also gives the story more gas to make something more interesting, and add stakes to something that typically a time traveler would be able to get around by setting new rules in this universe for them to follow. The most interesting part of this mechanic, however, we will talk about in the next episode. As always, thank you for listening.